Previously on Slayercoon Reviews, I took a look at the classic SNES launch title F-Zero, and the overlooked entry on the Game Boy Advance known as Maximum Velocity. I concluded that while the first F-Zero was a fairly groundbreaking title for its time, it has aged in many aspects. Wonky difficulty with often strange obstacles, a lack of any unlockables that would incentivize 100% completion, and a soundtrack with great compositions overall, but a muffled sound font that straddled the line between 16 and 8-bit. 12 bits? 10 bits? The wrist game? Maximum Velocity in turn was essentially a long-lost expansion to F-Zero 1, but for the GBA. It had the exact same style of gameplay, but in general felt like the game the first F-Zero should have been. Better difficulty balancing, better sound quality, and various unlockables making this title worth playing to completion. So with all of that said, how did Nintendo decide to follow up their first outing with F-Zero? Well, it took them nearly 8 years later in 1998 on the N64 for them to do that. Introducing F-Zero X. I'm really glad they didn't call it F-Zero 64 like every other N64 game out there. Okay, can I just go on a little rant here? I hate the N64. Okay, I don't actually hate it. It has some fantastic games overall, but the console itself is overrated as hell, which is odd coming from a console that didn't really fare well against the competing PS1. Ignoring this console's rather loud and obnoxious fanatics that have been prevalent on the internet since around 2011 or so, this console was just objectively worse than the PS1 when it came to the actual hardware, with it opting to use cartridges instead of CDs. The games couldn't pull off the same voice acting, high-quality music, or even gameplay as the PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, and Final Fantasy VII. These games would have been damn near impossible to make on the N64 without cutting them down to the point of unrecognizability. I mean, the N64 did have shorter load times and no texture warp, but it wasn't worth limiting what the games could do. Not to mention having one of the worst controllers of any mainstream console ever. And that's not even taking into consideration the awful third-party controllers. I mean, just look at this trash. What, am I supposed to play a game with this, or stick this up my— Seriously, what numbnuts thought that 3 handles was a good idea? Was this controller designed by victims of a nuclear waste accident or something? Ah, whatever. I'm getting off track. Let's go back to F-Zero X. F-Zero X was this series' first foray into proper 3D, and while the visuals were subpar even for the time, the actual tracks and gameplay demonstrated what proper 3D F-Zero could be. Graphics don't make a game, so the supposedly shitty visuals didn't bother me one bit. In fact, it actually works in this game's favor because this is the only N64 game to run at 60 FPS. Quite an achievement, I'd say, and something that makes the fast-paced gameplay even better. Like the previous outing, we have 3 different championships to play through. Defeating them on various difficulties will unlock additional vehicles. This is something the first F-Zero game completely dropped the ball on. I get this was a launch title for the Super Nintendo, but was adding in 4 unlockable vehicles that hard to pull off? Not to mention, you have tons of different vehicles to unlock, making this game highly replayable. You have 3 difficulties to choose from at the start, and an unlockable 4th one. This game can be a bit hard even on beginner difficulty, now with there being portions of the track you can easily fall off of. Still better than the quasi-glitch wins of the first game. This time, whenever you complete a lap, you gain boost power, which depletes your energy bar for using it, thus creating a clever risk and reward system. This game can be quite the ride on the harder difficulties, but it doesn't feel unfair at all. Difficulty is one of those things that is hard to get down, since a lot of so-called difficult games are only hard because of cheap or lazy game design. But F-Zero isn't the case, and from here on out, the series would actually get down high difficulty properly. There's also a mode in this game called Death Race, which involves you going around and wrecking all of your opponent's vehicles or die trying. This mode feels like an afterthought in all honesty. You only have 1 track, and it's easily the worst track in the game as well. So this is a mode you can pretty much skip and miss nothing. I've said that this is a hard game, which it kinda is, but one thing that mitigates even the hardest moments in this game is the soundtrack. F-Zero 1 soundtrack was good, but lacking in the sound department, even for a launch title. Very muffled and heavy on the horn sections. Super Mario World, by comparison, used the SNES sound font very well. F-Zero's muffled horn sections just sounded cheap compared to most SNES games. Well, F-Zero X remedies that with 3 simple words: heavy fucking metal. It's always good to see an OST that caters to my music taste, and this OST is arguably in my top 5 favorite game scores of all time. It's a lovely bundle of speed, thrash, and power metal that makes the balls-to-the-wall gameplay even more enthralling. We've got the improved version of Mute City. The melodic long distance of murder. And the intense Devil's Call in Your Heart. This one even has some pseudo-death growls in the background. Pound for pound, this game is metal as fuck, and the peak of F-Zero soundtracks. I would say that out of any N64 OST, this is the best one by far. Banjo-Kazooie and Ocarina of Time are cool and all that, but damn, this soundtrack is like 10 lines of cocaine and half a pack of Red Bull. Needless to say, it's perfect. F-Zero X has earned its place alongside my favorite racing games of all time. I'd say it's in my top 5 of that genre now. It's just so damn fun. I couldn't put it down during the recording process. It's a nice, simple, and short game that has tons of replay value. Kinda reminds me of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in that regard. And that's the kind of game I want more of nowadays. It's okay to have a short game that isn't an overly controlling campaign. And in the realm of short but sweet games, F-Zero X is one of the best, with its fast-paced gameplay, crazy vehicles, and heavy metal majesty. F-Zero X gets a 9 out of 10, easily my favorite F-Zero game so far, and as of now, one of my favorite racing games period. I've yet to play GX, but I wait to see what greatness that title has to offer. But in the meantime, this totally metal title has me hooked. But if you think that's the end of the story, think again, because F-Zero X got its own expansion kit on the failed N64DD. I won't go into any detail about that portion of the console. I'll probably save that for whenever I make a full-blown video on why I dislike the N64. It features a few new tracks which are more the same, although it does feature Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64, the worst Mario Kart game not counting Tour or Home Circuit. It also had a custom machine editor and even the ability to create your own tracks. If only the vanilla game had that. I would give it a perfect 10 if that was the case, no joke. Unfortunately, the only way to play this nowadays is either having the N64DD and the game, or emulating it. I'd prefer doing the latter if you were interested, no matter how much Nintendo hates it. If only they'd opt to re-release these rare and expensive games on the eShop for a budget price. And while they're at it, can we get GTA Chinatown Wars on the eShop as well, please? I'm begging you. Did you know that the N64 only had around 400 games on it? Now that might seem like a lot, but in comparison, the PS1 had either 1,300 or 7,000 depending on where you're getting your information from. Wikipedia says that there are 4,000 PS1 games. Now obviously that's quantity over quality, but it does go to show you how much publishers did not like the N64's use of cartridges. Even the Sega Saturn had more games, and I've seen local lemonade stands that were more financially successful than that system was. Goes to show you the consequences of using outdated media. I just realized looking back on the F-Zero X expansion footage that some of the tracks have very clever track shapes. We have one that's shaped like an X, and one that's shaped like Japan. I just think that they should have also included a track that looks like this.